Hello and welcome back. Alright, so in this video I'm going to cover something that I've been recently learning, and that is Android. It's taken me about 4 years testing different ways of learning, and I actually learned a lot more before I ever started learning how to develop in Android. I recently had a breakthrough and I've been crash coursing like crazy. I think I've spent probably 2.5 weeks of doing nothing but Android, and I'm able to network and database. So I feel comfortable at this point to actually give a tutorial To start off, I'm actually going to use Intellij. If you want to use the same setup as I have, you need to download the Android Sdk, right? And the Sdk stands for Software Development Kit. And that basically means it's a whole bunch of tools inside of a program that allows you to develop. Okay? Now, you will have to download the program, which is the IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment. In other words, it's the development environment that integrates the language with the environment so that you can actually develop in it. Once you download this, you will then need to download your Java version. Java download. Don't care if I spelled it wrong. There we go. Oh. No. Stop it. No. Java Sdk download. Okay. Now, SDK stands for Software Development Kit, which means that there's software involved. What you're looking for is JDK, which is Java Development Kit. And you just go down to the main page here. All I did was just type in Java Software Development Kit, SDK, download. And then I was led to this page, and I click on this. And what you'll do is you'll choose the one that's appropriate for your operating system. For mine, it's x64, and that's because that's what my machine runs. If you are 32-bit, you will want to look for x86. Okay? Now, how do you know what you are? All you have to do is right-click on My Computer and go to Properties, and you will know what bit version you have on a computer, because that'll bring up the screen that has the bit version. Okay, so once you download that, you can then download Intellij from their website, and that's kind of obvious where that is. Okay, so once you have Intellij downloaded, as you can see, I have several applications that I've done, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set it up for the most part. When you downloaded all that different software, you can go over here to Configure, and then Project Defaults, and then Project Structure. And this will bring up, you'll be landed in the Project SDK. Now, you will have downloaded an API with your SDK. If not, let's see. You will have downloaded an SDK for your version. Okay? Now, down here in SDKs, this is very important because this is how you find new SDKs. And all you have to do is add and then Android Sdk, and then it'll add this, and then you'll have to go find your SDK. And you always want to select a build target. For instance, mine's 23, but I do have several other different types of build targets. You also need a Java SDK, and that'll just be your Java file. So unless it doesn't automatically find it, you can usually find your SDK in whatever location your Java SDK was installed in. So once those are set up, all right, you can then create a new project. Now, there's going to be a lot of information here. Don't fret over it too much. Don't just go, oh my gosh, there's just so much. It's so messy. I don't think I can handle this. Because believe it or not, I know that feeling. I've tried this before. A lot of people tried to get me to use Eclipse, and Eclipse is not a beginner version, and Android Studio is definitely not a beginner version, and neither is Android Sdk, and neither is Intellij. But you should pause on that thinking for a moment, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain everything. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. Okay, so we've got my application. Okay, that's the application name. It'll go on the package name. And the package name is the overall name of the package that you're signing for. Essentially, when I say package, you have to upload a package to the Google Play Store. And when you uploaded it, whenever you upload it, you have to have a unique name. Now, the odds of you having the same company domain with the same application name are very low. So they make you do this. Now, your default application name is my application. You can write anything you want in here. It's just what your application is going to be called on your computer. Okay? And then you have this lovely thing. Now, don't worry about this. This is just a whole bunch of extra stuff. Right now, you're just doing Android. Now, you can develop for much more than just the phone and the tablet. But most of the time, you will be developing for the phone and the tablet. So you will have to select this. It will be selected by default, and you will have to choose your SDK. Now, I have several different SDK versions, and you can go download the SDK versions by just opening up the Android Studio. You don't have to do it from this, but you will be given a default SDK. And if this is not the one you want to start out with, if this is not the one you want to develop with beforehand, and you don't quite know how to actually get access to the SDK manager inside of Intellij, then you can just open up Android Studio, and you don't have to go into the main application. You can get the manager right then and there. Right? But for the most part, once you understand how to use Intellij, you won't use Android Studio again. Because it's powered by Intellij. You saw that, right? It's powered by Intellij. Okay? So, yeah, plugins, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, unlike Intellij, though, you've got an SDK manager. And the SDK manager is what you need. Okay? As you can see, there's the different APIs. So you just select one and you apply it. But how do you download them? Well, you just click on this. Launch standalone SDK manager. And what this will do is it'll launch a manager of all the different applications installed. Okay? So the first thing that you need to understand is that whenever you build something, right, you need the build tools. So whenever you choose an API, you need to choose the build tools. Then you need to look up here and pay attention to what API you want to install. Okay? Once you find the API that you want to install, if you have an AMD processor without virtualization, you will need to download an ARM with Google APIs right here. If you have an Intel without virtualization, you need to download the Intel with Google APIs. If, on the other hand, you do have an Intel that supports virtualization, you just need to download the Intel x86. And the x86 stands for 32-bit. So if you wanted to develop for 32-bit, you can on a 64-bit device, but x86 is the 32-bit version. And then Atom64 stands for this is a 64-bit version. Okay. Anything else you need to know here? Also, you need to download the Google APIs separately and the sources for Android Sdk. Okay. Now, you can go through here and you might need to download some more. Like I downloaded the support repository. But for the most part, that's pretty much what you need to download. Okay. And then you can exit out of here and then you're back here. Okay. Now, here's a wonderful thing about the API that you're using. Android already knows how many APIs are out there. So, for instance, I develop for KitKat, which means that my application will have a market of 73% people. Okay, so I'll have access to 73% of the Android market. If you were to develop for, like, say, the newest one, you'd have like 5%. So needless to say, sometimes it's better to develop in the older version. And then once you select that, you can select this. Now, I'm going to go back out of this and actually select a different project because I tried to record this before and then, I don't know, the power just went out for absolutely no reason. But I did select empty activity. Now, you can choose no activity, but I suggest that you choose like a default activity until you know what you're doing. So, and what this will do is it'll just create the layout for you, and then it'll build everything, and that's what this does. Okay, so I'll press cancel, and then I'll go up to the first application. Okay, so as you can see down here, it says Gradle build. Now, Gradle is found over here. And what Gradle does is it manages all your dependencies, right? When you first start your screen, it'll probably look like this, okay? It'll probably look like this mess right here. It'll look like this mess. And this mess is horrible. And don't pay attention to these little symbols right here. Because that was another intimidating thing that I had to deal with, was dealing with these different little symbols, because I didn't know what they meant at first. Don't worry about that. Just worry about the file names, okay? Now, in order to clean up this screen, there's this button right here. And this button makes everything go away. You could even do it to your activity, but then you wouldn't be developing. Now, let's get back to Gradle. So Gradle helps you clean things. And cleaning basically means it removes anything extra that, you don't actually need in the application. Anything that's not actually referenced in the application, like methods that aren't actually used and assets that aren't used. Essentially, clean is for whenever you finally go to your application and you finish it, right? So clean is for the final bit. And then then you test your application to make sure it still runs. And if it doesn't run, then you build dependents, because that usually means that something that was dependent on something else that was considered useless by clean has been removed. So you build the dependents, which means you go get the dependents back. Okay? Okay, so the next one that I want to cover is the AVD, Android Virtual Device. Android Virtual Device is your emulator. Whenever you finally build your application and whenever you want to test whether a feature is working, such as if you're running through a loop on your Android and you're looping through different things to show them to the screen, then you're going to want to use an emulator device. Now, creating an emulator is really easy. First, you're given the option to select a view, and XXHDPI just means that it's very large and it runs off of DPI, and DPI stands for density per inch. And what that means is it shows this many pixels per inch. So this many pixels are in this square of an inch, right? So essentially, unlike HTML, if you know how to program that, where it requires pixels, and sometimes if you're knowledgeable enough, you can use higher, but pixels are very structured. What DPI allows you to do is base it off of the DP. So in other words, a less density per inch item, right, is going to take up less room. So it allows it to have a responsive design. Okay? And that's really all that means. And then you have the API level version and then your target. Now, let's go ahead and go through the process because I know that can be confusing. So we'll just go right past the screen and we'll be in here, okay? So if you have an Intel version, this is your screen, right? If you have an AMD version, the other images is your screen. And what you want to do is you want to select the one with the Google APIs, because the one with the regular Android doesn't actually modify the application to run with the emulator. And it has significant performance issues. So the one you want to choose is the one with the Google APIs. Now, obviously, you can see I have more than one installed, and that's because I like to play around. But normally, I go with the Google KitKat, and then you go to the next screen. And what this is if you know what you're doing, again, you can open the advanced bit, and you can actually modify this so that you can target specific varieties of devices. And what I mean by that is there are devices that meet the screen size but don't meet the storage space, right? You sometimes want to develop something with a very specific storage set in mind. Okay? And that's pretty much what this is for. It's also, if you have very specific hardware, like if you have an okay processor but a awesome graphics card, then you can go here and say you want the software to run it because your graphics card is being used by something, or you can use hardware to basically run off of your graphics card instead of your CPU. But for the most part, when you're new, this is okay. It'll create the default application that you need to use. Okay? And then you just click finish. And then we can exit out of that. And then once you build your application, you'll come up here and you'll press play. Okay? That's it, really. For that. Now, we have this. Now, if you see here, we have rendering problems, and that's okay. Basically, what that means is that, you know, you have a current problem in your application that doesn't allow you to perfectly seamlessly transition to the newest level of API. But to be honest, I'm not developing for that. I'm actually developing for 19, but I'm going to use 23. Because 23 is the solid number right now where it doesn't really bug out. And the phone will show up right here. Now, this is only a partial emulator. This is only showing you the design on the phone, right? Oh, and just so you know, whenever you first open the application, it'll be in the text view by default. And this is the design of the application. This is what the application looks like on the phone. If I were to click this button, it would open up an emulation of the phone, and then it would open up the application on the phone, and it would look like this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and drag some radio buttons here, just because I feel like showing you how easy it is to design in this. Okay, and as you can see here, there's a little tree over here, and this is to keep track of inheritance, because you can have more than one layout inside of a layout. Now, speaking of layouts, let's go ahead and go over into the text file, and I'll start explaining this. Okay, so Android is made up of two different languages. It's made up of XML and Java. So XML is kind of like HTML, but it allows you to create your own tags. This is very useful for companies like Google, because it allowed them to create this, which basically means that they can have their own tags with their own properties and their own values. Okay, they don't need to create an entirely new language in order to do this. What they just need to do is use XML and then build this in XML so that they can reuse that XML file over and over, right? And that's actually what the schema is for. So this schema is for the Android package kit. This is for whenever you're packaging it and, you know, doing anything that's outside of the code itself. And then the tools is pretty much everything else. Now, you have a relative layout. Now, what is a relative layout? Think of a layout as how you lay out a rug, right? You put one rug down, and you put items onto it. Now, if they're a bunch of letters, then you put them next to each other. That is called a relative layout. And that is because you are putting things in relative proportion to themselves. That's what a relative layout is. Now, there's also called a vertical layout and a few other layouts. A linear layout, which can have the orientation of vertical and horizontal. Linear layout is like setting up a cabinet. It's very linear. You can't just place everything where you want it to go. That's kind of what you use relative layout for. But if you've got an application that has one thing after another, such as like an application form, that would use a linear layout. All right. And then once you have a layout, you have a view. And all of these are views. And we call them views because we can see them. That's it. As simple as it gets. Okay. So that's why we call them views. Okay. And then we have our property names, and we have our property values. Okay. So whenever you're trying to access something like padding or anything, you put Android and a colon, and that's an access modifier. That is referencing the tools library so that we can modify the layout width of this view. Okay, and each one will have different tags. And if you want to see all the tags, you can either go to the document pages, or you can just click on the text view and look at the different parameters all the way over here. Now, text view has quite a bit, but relative layout doesn't have very much because it's just layout. There's not much to it. And as you can see, there's different types of layouts and different types of widgets and different types of text fields. Now, there's something down here that you might not want to experiment with just yet until you know what you're doing, and that would be the expert and the custom. The expert is for people who know how to do certain things that require advanced knowledge, okay? Such as View Animator, which is how to set up animations in your application, okay? And then down here is like Custom View, and Custom View is whenever you're doing anything really very specific. To create a custom view, you have to be very far along in your Android development to understand what that's doing. Okay, so if you want to look at the properties, you can go over here in the design view, because there's a design and there's a text, right? Now, how does this actually link to the screen? Okay, well, let's go over to the Java file, because that's how it links to the screen. Okay, so we've got package com, and okay, this is our package name, right? It comes in as a Java file, and then we import some stuff. And this is Android support version 7 app compat activity. What is app compatibility? Well, I'm pretty sure you'll understand what it is whenever I say it in its full name. Application compatible activity. In other words, this allows your application to be compatible across different APIs. Now, your application will only be compatible with APIs your level and above. And that's because applications before your API level don't have the same tools as you. Okay? So, and then we have import Android OS bundle, and that is the operating system bundle. So that's how it puts everything in, right? And that's referencing a class. Now we'll get down to class here, but essentially bundle is how everything is put together inside Android. Now you're going to learn a little bit of Java if you don't know it already. We have an access modifier, and what that means is that it's either protected, public, or private. Now public means that other classes can use it, okay? And the class that's using it is app compat activity. And a class is just an object. It's like a library, right? It's like you go into a library and the methods of that library are the books of that library, okay? So, but in order to actually get the stuff out of app compat activity, you have to extend that. So essentially what we're saying is that we have a class object that's publicly available that is extending the library of app compat activity. Okay? Now, there's something here that I absolutely love because it references a whole bunch of stuff, and that is protected. Now, what does protected mean? Protected means that unless you override it with a very special override command, you cannot change it. It means it will not change. Okay? Now, what does this void mean? Well, the first parameter is always the level of access, right? So public means everybody can access it. Protected means that you can access it against different classes so long that it's extended, and you can even override it. And then private is just it stays within this class. Okay? So the first one is an access modifier. The second one is what it will be returning. Now void means it won't return anything. If we were to return an integer, we would put int here. If we returned a string, we would put string here. Okay? And then we have the actual name of the method, right? And that's whatever you want it to be. And then you have some parameters. And what this is it's a saved instance state of bundle. And that's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll elaborate. Essentially, what it's saying is that this is an instance state of bundle. So once we bundle everything, this is the instance state. This current application is the instance state, right? Now super.onCreate is just it's kind of redundant, but it's basically saying that when this is created, use this on it, right? Okay? And then we'll set the content view to this string. Now this string may seem a little confusing at first until we start looking for it. because the R is actually short for resource, and we find resource in our build file. What? Where did it go? What the? Oh, okay. There we are. So source, resource. Let's see. Layout, and then activity main, which is up here. Okay? So essentially, it's creating an instance of this application and then setting the view content, what we see, to this layout here. And then that means the user will see this. Okay? So that was it for the first tutorial. I just wanted to go over everything so that you understand how things fit into certain things. And this was something that I didn't find a lot of instructors did. They kind of just started developing, which is kind of annoying, you know? It's kind of like, don't even bother looking around the room and seeing if there's anything helpful. Just start doing your math quiz, even though the answers are up on the wall. That's kind of how I felt about that type of teaching. And then I got very lucky. I finally hit a break. So this is my first tutorial. I will plan to make more in the future. Now, I am actually not a core Android developer, right? I did not start as an Android developer. I actually started as a game developer, and I was a Ruby man. I love Ruby. I love using Ruby, but if I have to use another language to do what I want, then I will. But I have a Ruby on Rails course, and if you are absolutely new to all this programming and whatnot, I even have a free 7-hour course that teaches you pretty much everything on HTML, everything on CSS, and a few things on JavaScript, because JavaScript is pretty massive. But that's absolutely free. And then if you just want to go straight to full stack and spend 21 hours over time to learn an entire full stack of the Ruby on Rails system, then I'll leave that in the links down below. So, all right, until next time.